It was an unusually warm afternoon in Washington, D.C., the kind where the air clung thick and the sun beat down with the kind of intensity usually reserved for southern summers. On the edge of the South Lawn, cameras flickered like restless lightning bugs, and members of the White House press corps clustered around the protective ropes, waiting. Among them stood Rebecca Lane, a 34-year-old liberal reporter from the National Lens, a rising star in political journalism. With chestnut brown hair tied neatly back and a slim notepad in one hand, she was known for her sharp tongue and even sharper questions. Many of her colleagues admired her courage, others thought she was reckless. But today, none of that mattered. The president was on his way out. Donald J. Trump, re-elected in 2024 and currently serving his second term, had just wrapped up a strategic economic meeting with African Union envoys. It was supposed to be a closed-door affair, but murmurs of tariff talks and new military agreements had leaked. And Rebecca, smelling the blood of controversy, was not one to let it slip by. A shout echoed across the lawn. "Mr. President." A question. Trump, in his classic blue suit with the red tie swinging slightly in the breeze, raised a hand to block the sunlight. His entourage, Secret Service, aides, and his newly appointed press secretary froze as he turned toward the press line. He smiled, that unmistakable smirk etched into American memory. "I'll take a few," he said, walking toward the rope. Microphones lifted. Voices clashed. But Rebecca Lane, standing in the middle of the chaos, didn't shout. She simply lifted her hand high, waiting. Trump saw her. He knew her face. "You," he said, pointing directly. "Rebecca, right? The National Lens. Go ahead." "What now?" The cameras zoomed in. Boom mics tilted toward her. She didn't flinch. "Mr. President," Rebecca began, her voice clear and steady, "given that your administration just hosted African leaders while also announcing expanded tariffs on raw materials from the continent, how do you reconcile strengthening diplomacy with what many see as economic aggression?" A beat of silence. Trump blinked. "First of all," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "what we're doing is making fair trade, not free giveaways. The African nations we spoke to, great people, by the way, tremendous, they understand that America's got to come first. And they respect that. You should too." Rebecca didn't back down. "With respect, sir, African nations have expressed concern over what they call neo-colonial economics. If the U.S. wants to counter China's influence in Africa, how does slapping tariffs on copper, cobalt, and lithium imports help?" A murmur rippled through the press corps. Some looked away. Some leaned in. Trump gave a short laugh. "Neo-colonial? Sounds like something you came up with at Columbia." "Huh." He chuckled, but Rebecca stayed silent, eyes locked on his. He continued, "Look, we're working on reciprocal trade. That means if we get slapped with taxes, we slap back. It's not aggression, it's negotiation. We're not colonizing anyone, we're making deals. The best deals. Better than Biden ever dreamed of. Let me tell you." Another question burned on her lips, but Trump interrupted. "Next question." "No, Mr. President, I have a follow-up," Rebecca began, but he raised his hand. "You've had your question. Be happy I called on you at all. The moment could have ended there." The camera crews turned slightly. Other reporters began shouting again. But Rebecca did something no one expected. She stepped forward. "Then answer this," she said, her voice rising just enough to cut through the noise. "What do you say to the American farmers losing contracts due to retaliatory tariffs from Africa and Latin America? You campaigned on protecting them, yet they're bleeding under your current policy." Trump stopped mid-step. He looked at her again, this time with more than casual irritation. "That's fake news," he said slowly. "We're compensating farmers with subsidies. They love me. Just ask Iowa." "But do they love being dependent on government aid?" She pushed back. "Isn't that socialism, Mr. President?" Gasps. Audible gasps. Trump's eyes narrowed. Rebecca Lane had just fired a bullet most reporters wouldn't dare load. He stepped back toward the rope, a twitch in his jaw. "You really don't get it, do you?" he said. "Socialism is when people like you want to take everyone's money and give it to people who don't work. We're helping patriots who were hit because we're fighting for a better trade deal." "You're cherry-picking definitions," she replied calmly. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned away. The press secretary shouted, "That's all for today," and began herding the crowd. But the press wasn't moving. Everyone had seen it. Rebecca Lane had cracked something. And Trump knew it. The next morning, every major news outlet from CNN to Fox ran the clip. Rebecca Lane corners Trump on Africa tariffs and farmers' aid blared across GRILLS. On social media, hashtags like hashtag Lane versus Trump and hashtag tariff truth began trending. Cable news networks split as expected. Progressive channels hailed her as a bold truth-teller, while conservative ones branded her another arrogant liberal with a gotcha agenda. But even critics admitted she had rattled him. And no one could ignore that. Back in her newsroom at the National Lens, Rebecca watched the replay of the exchange while sipping her lukewarm coffee. Editors and junior reporters glanced her way with hushed admiration. "You're all over the feeds," said Marcus, her colleague and friend. "You've done what half the DC press corps has been trying to do since 2016. Rebecca didn't smile. "He dodged every real answer," she said, "eyes still on the screen. And nobody asked about the GOP's internal chaos either. That's next." Just then, her editor-in-chief, Carla Medina, walked in holding a printout. "Rebecca," she said, "we just got a response from the White House, officially calling your questions hostile and misleading." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Good. That means they're paying attention." Carla smirked. "You've got another White House press pass for tomorrow. Trump's flying to Michigan for a GOP rally, and we'll take a few questions before boarding Air Force One." Rebecca nodded. "Let's keep pressing." The next day, the Detroit airstrip was packed with security and press. The smell of jet fuel hung in the air as reporters gathered once again, mics in hand. Trump approached the press with a different tone this time. He was defensive, more cautious. Rebecca could see it in his body language. His speeches at rallies had taken on an angrier edge since the previous day, peppered with shots like, "We've got liberal reporters twisting words, saying we're hurting farmers." These are the same people who want open borders and windmills that don't work. Still, he made eye contact with her again. And once again, he called on her. "Rebecca Lane, let's hear your latest accusation." She stepped forward. "Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, you said you're negotiating better deals for America, but your own party leaders are fracturing over trade. Senator Tillman said your tariff policies are gutting GOP unity. Do you still have control over your party, or is the GOP splintering under your second term?" It was surgical, sharp, and on record. Trump's face flushed. "Let me tell you something, Rebecca, our party is stronger than ever. We've got patriots, not globalists. If some people can't handle the heat of American greatness, they can leave the kitchen." Rebecca followed up quickly. "Yet Governor Walsh just endorsed a Freedom Caucus breakaway movement. That's not unity, Mr. President, that's a revolt." Now Trump was visibly agitated. "Walsh is a loser. He was a loser when he ran for governor, and he's a loser now. Nobody takes him seriously." "But the markets do," she shot back. "The Dow dipped 300 points after his announcement." He pointed a finger at her. "You and your little economic doom stories, you're always wrong. We have record energy exports, historic job numbers, and the best GDP growth since Reagan." "Correction," Rebecca said without flinching. "Since 2023, GDP growth has slowed for 3 straight quarters. And job numbers have been flat, not historic. That's according to your own Labor Department data." Trump waved his hand. "Fake data. Deep state. Next question." But the damage was done. Reporters around her were stunned at how effectively she had cornered him again. For a moment, Trump looked directly at her, a flicker of unease behind his bravado. Rebecca lowered her notepad and asked calmly, "Are you still the leader of the Republican Party, Mr. President? Or just the loudest voice left in it?" Gasps again. Even Secret Service looked up. Trump paused. Then he stepped away, climbed the steps to Air Force One, and vanished behind the closing door. Rebecca had crossed another line, and she knew it. But so did America. The clip from the Detroit airstrip exploded across the country. Within hours, clips of Rebecca's question, "Are you still the leader of the Republican Party, Mr. President? Or just the loudest voice left in it?" were turned into TikToks, memes, and remix videos. Progressive pundits hailed it as the question of the decade. Conservative commentators, on the other hand, doubled down on their attacks. One anchor on Patriot America News called her a leftist disruptor who should have her credentials revoked. But perhaps most surprisingly, there was silence from Trump's usual late-night Twitter-style truth social responses. No nickname, no rant. Just silence. Inside the newsroom of the National Lens, Rebecca was in deep research mode. Papers scattered across her desk, a giant U.S.-Africa trade balance chart pinned to her wall. Her next angle? The contradictions between Trump's claimed anti-globalist policies and his administration's quietly growing military footprint in African nations. She wasn't just asking tough questions. She was building a case. That evening, as she reviewed footage from a Senate hearing on foreign aid, she received a text from a blocked number. "You're digging too deep. Careful where you go next." She paused. Was it just a troll? A second message followed. "You think he walked away because you beat him? Think again." She stared at the screen. A mix of anger and fear bubbled in her chest. But this wasn't her first brush with intimidation. In fact, it only confirmed one thing: she was on the right track. 2 days later, Rebecca received an invitation to a closed press briefing. A senior aide, speaking off the record, said Trump would address international partnerships and allow a select few reporters in. When she arrived, the energy was different. The room was quiet. Fewer cameras. Fewer reporters. Just a tight group of loyal networks and 2 critical voices, Rebecca being one. Trump entered without the usual music or fanfare. His expression was grim, jaw tight. "Let's keep this brief," he said. Rebecca waited until he looked toward her. She raised her hand. He hesitated, then pointed at her again. "Yes, you again," he said. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." Rebecca didn't react. "Thank you, Mr. President. You've increased military cooperation with 3 African nations in the last 6 months. If your administration opposes global entanglements and foreign policing, how do you explain this shift?" Trump folded his arms. "You want to know why?" he asked. "Because China is taking over the continent. They're buying land, minerals, ports. If we don't act, we'll lose Africa to the Chinese. And we're not going to let that happen. Not on my watch." Rebecca followed up immediately. "But you also claimed you'd end forever entanglements. Isn't this the same playbook from past administrations, just wrapped in your own branding?" Trump stepped forward, voice raised. "Wrong. Totally wrong. This is about leverage, not occupation. We're not building bases, we're building partnerships. And if you can't see the difference, maybe you need to go back to journalism school." Snickers erupted from a few conservative reporters. Rebecca didn't blink. "So you admit your doctrine is shifting from isolation to strategic influence?" Trump leaned in slightly, pointing again. "No, sweetheart. I'm saying America leads. And if you've got a problem with that, maybe you should interview Xi Jinping instead." Gasps filled the room. But Rebecca just replied calmly, "I would, sir, if he allowed press freedom." The room went quiet. Trump stared for a beat, then waved his hand. "That's it. She's done for the day." Outside the briefing room, a CNN producer whispered, "He's losing control." Another reporter added, "She's exposing the cracks." But Rebecca didn't care about the chatter. She had one more question brewing. One that would tie the entire knot of trade, politics, and hypocrisy together. And she knew exactly where to ask it. At the GOP fundraiser gala the following week. The night of the GOP Grand Vision fundraiser gala was drenched in DC opulence. Held at the historic Mellon Auditorium, the event sparkled with chandeliers, black ties, and carefully staged photo ops. Political donors, corporate CEOs, senators, and party strategists all mingled under the gilded ceilings, sipping champagne and whispering about 2028 contenders. Even as Trump dominated the evening's headlines, Rebecca Lane, in a sleek navy blue dress and press badge clipped discreetly to her clutch, walked past layers of security into the ballroom. This wasn't her usual beat. No screaming crowds, no White House fence lines. Here power was quieter, polished, but her mission was loud and clear. Inside, Trump was already making rounds, shaking hands with fossil fuel magnates and media barons. The president wore a broad grin, but it was clear to the trained eye. He hadn't forgotten Rebecca. "Mississippi Lane," a voice said from behind. She turned. It was Troy Castor, Trump's senior communications advisor. "You're bold to show up here tonight," he said with a tight smile. She smiled back professionally. "It's a public event. I'm still press." He narrowed his eyes. "Just know, this crowd's not like Detroit or the tarmac. They don't clap for ambush journalism." "I don't need applause," she replied. "Just truth." Suddenly, the band quieted. All eyes turned as Trump took the stage. He grabbed the mic with both hands and looked around the room like a lion surveying his pride. "We've done more for this country than any administration in history," he began. "We've faced the media lies, the swamp sabotage, the foreign freeloaders, and we're still standing stronger than ever." Applause erupted. Donors raised their glasses. Rebecca remained seated, recording. Then came the moment. "We've got some in the room tonight," Trump said, eye scanning. "Reporters who like to play games. Who think pointing out gotchas makes them brave. But here's the truth, they don't understand real leadership." Some laughter rippled through the crowd. Trump's gaze fell on Rebecca, brief but unmistakable. She stood up. "Mr. President," she said, loud enough to hush nearby tables, "will you take one final question, one America deserves an answer to?" The room stilled. Even waiters froze mid-pour. Trump raised an eyebrow, amused. "You just don't give up, do you?" "No," she replied. "Because I still believe in accountability." He motioned sarcastically. "Go ahead. Entertain us." Rebecca stepped forward. "You've imposed tariffs that hurt American consumers, signed military pacts with African nations while denouncing foreign entanglements, and now you're presiding over a GOP fractured between traditional conservatives and populists. My question is simple, are your policies built for the American people or built for preserving your power?" Gasps. Trump's jaw tensed. "You want the truth," he said. "Fine. I don't play by the old rules. I make deals where America wins. If that offends the establishment, good. If it rattles the press, even better. And if some Republicans don't like it, maybe they're the problem, not me." Rebecca held his stare. "So no answer?" "That is the answer," Trump said, voice raised. "I'm not here to please the swamp. I'm here to destroy it." A few claps, mostly from loyalists. But Rebecca stepped forward once more. "Then let history note," she said quietly, "that a president's final defense wasn't policy, but defiance." She turned and walked out as murmurs erupted behind her. Outside the auditorium, the cool DC night air hit her face like clarity. Cameras flashed, reporters gathered, and social media feeds exploded. The question had been asked. And America, divided, exhausted, but listening, was still watching. In the aftermath of the gala, a ripple turned into a wave. Rebecca Lane's question, "Are your policies built for the American people or built for preserving your power?" dominated headlines across every major outlet. The clip went viral. Not just on news channels, but in living rooms, school debates, barbershops, church meetings, and political strategy war rooms. Fox News branded her the progressive media's new Joan of Arc. MSNBC called her a beacon of press integrity. Even Joe Rogan, who often avoided mainstream politics, dissected the moment with guests for nearly an hour. And as for Trump? 2 days later, he was back at a campaign rally in Arizona, red hat on, crowd roaring. But even there, something was different. His usual targets, Crooked Hillary, Sleepy Joe, fake news, were now joined by a new name. Rebecca Lane, radical, nasty, arrogant, thinks she's the next Woodward or Bernstein. But we know what she really is. A spotlight junkie who doesn't love America. The crowd jeered, but the attack only amplified her platform. Back in DC, Rebecca was offered a primetime anchor spot. Book deals, documentary pitches. One political podcast offered her a co-hosting seat to replace a recently ousted anchor. But she wasn't interested in celebrity. She knew that the real story hadn't been told yet. Not fully. And so she returned to the research room at the National Lens, her familiar desk now littered with notes, interview transcripts, diplomatic memos, and a secret cache of leaked documents she'd recently received anonymously. A trove of communications between Trump's administration and private contractors operating in Africa. Oil, minerals, and defense contracts. Billions in play. The kind of dealings the American public never voted for. The kind of influence that had nothing to do with patriotism and everything to do with private power. She scanned one email in particular. "Keep the African deals off the official ledger. POTUS wants plausible distance. If anyone asks, say it's strictly humanitarian." The sender? A senior aide. The recipient? A known GOP megadonor with investments in rare earth metals. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, pulse racing. This wasn't just about bold questions anymore. This was about exposure. Weeks later, a primetime special aired across multiple networks simultaneously. The New Frontier, Trump, Africa, and the Shadow Trade. Narrated and investigated by Rebecca Lane. It stunned the nation. Clips of Trump denouncing globalism were juxtaposed with footage of U.S. contractors quietly unloading equipment in remote parts of West Africa. Families displaced by mining deals. An interview with a whistleblower who claimed Trump personally greenlit certain operations under strategic economic security. Congress demanded a hearing. Trump's team labeled it fictional trash. But it was too late. Rebecca testified before a Senate subcommittee 2 months later. Calm. Factual. Relentless. When asked how she found the courage to push so hard in an era of media hostility, she replied, Because journalism isn't about asking safe questions in comfortable rooms. It's about holding the powerful accountable even when they're armed with crowds, microphones, and billions of dollars. Applause broke out from the gallery. That same night, she walked alone to the Lincoln Memorial. It was quiet. The city briefly still. She sat on the steps, pulled out her notepad, and jotted down one last headline. One question changed everything. She paused, then scratched it out. Instead, she wrote, "More questions to come."